Hi, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good day and welcome to Sona Comstar Q1 FY22 earnings conference call. Please note all participant lines are in the listen-only mode as of now. There will be an opportunity for you to ask questions after the presentation concludes. Please note that this call is being recorded. Some of the statements by the management team in today's conference call may be forward-looking in nature, and we request you to refer to the disclaimer in the earnings presentation for further details. The management will also not be taking any specific customer-related questions or confirm or deny any customer names or relationships due to confidentiality reasons. Please refrain from naming any customer in your questions. Now, I'll hand over the call to Mr. Kapil Singh, Auto Sector Analyst for Nomura. Kapil, please go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. To take us through the 1Q FY22 results and to answer your questions, we have with us today Mr. Vivek Vikram Singh, MD and Group CEO, Mr. Kiran Manohar Deshmukh, Group CTO, Mr. Vikram Verma, CEO of the Driveline Business, Mr. Sat Mohan Gupta, CEO of the Motor Business, and Mr. Rohit Nanda, Group CFO. I will now hand over the call to Mr. Vivek Vikram Singh for his opening remarks and presentation. Over to you, Vivek.
Of Sona Comstar, I would like to welcome all of you to our first earning call post our listing. So first, let me begin with thanking all of you for making our IPO so successful. And since our first time doing this, please forgive us if we miss anything important, and hopefully we can cover it in the Q&A section. So we'll begin as we usually do with our vision. Why we exist as a company is to become India's most respected and valuable auto technology company. To make a company that India can be proud of for its engineering skills in solving complex and customized engineering problems for our customers and in enabling the future of mobility. And our story is a testament to this long-term vision. There are three phases to our story. The first, or the foundation phase, where we began as a single product company. But even then, we had a huge technology advantage of precision forming. Our differential gears were not only much better, they were also much more economical. And this unbeatable advantage is what allowed us to grow at nearly 50% CAGR in the first 12 years of our journey. Our second phase was what we call our consolidation years, when the Indian auto industry growth was quite slow. And our growth too moderated to a CAGR of 10%. But we improved our EBITDA margin from an average of 21% in the first phase to around 25%. And we also, very importantly, moved up the value chain into making differential assemblies as a new product. Our third phase was the one which was truly transformational. In organic terms alone, without considering the Comstar acquisition, in organic terms alone, we massively expanded our export business and grew our customer base from 22 to 37 customers. We introduced 3 more products in this 5-year period. We also started our EV journey here with gears for electric cars, and later we vertically integrated into making the final drive differential assembly. At this juncture, we also realized that ultimately the driveline will merge with the motor, and having electrical capabilities would be critical in the electrified axle. So along with our tremendous organic growth, we also did a highly value accretive acquisition of Comstar, and these two combined together have helped us achieve over 32% CAGR growth in this 5-year phase, while simultaneously increasing our EBITDA margin to an average of nearly 28%. While our fourth phase begins now with all your blessings, I will like to highlight that in our past 22 years, we have grown at an incredible rate of 36%, while always sustaining excellent margins. And at any phase in our story, we have exceeded the industry growth rate by many, many times. Our results on growth, profitability, and returns rest on the foundation of our values of integrity above all, vitality, agility, and frugality. For us, growth, margin, and returns are all important, and it takes enormous discipline from the management team to maintain this healthy balance. And it's because of this focus, I think, that we managed to demonstrate over 32% revenue growth, nearly 28% EBITDA margin, and at least 28% returns consistently. And we expect that these metrics will continue to stay strong in the future as well. And by staying true to this mission that you saw and the values, we've also managed to achieve something quite unique. We are among a handful of companies globally, and perhaps the only one in India, to have all three, which is large EV revenue share, good scale and high growth, while achieving and maintaining remarkable financial performance. I'll touch upon each of these three aspects in the context of our recent quarter in the next 3 slides. First, EV. So our revenue share from battery electric vehicles has gone up to 19.9% in Q1 from 13.8% in FY21. Our EV revenue has shown very strong growth in absolute terms as well and has reached almost 97 crores. It also gives me great pride to say that 1 out of every 8 battery electric differential assemblies sold in the world today are made in our Manesar plant at Sona. If you look at sequentially also, 33% growth in our battery electric vehicle revenue. Now the EV industry is forecast to grow at 36% CAGR for the next 4 or 5 years. And with 17 programs, EV programs already awarded to us, we believe that our EV business will grow at a very robust pace. Second is our future growth, and this is slightly a new slide and new information. Our net order book at the end of Q1 stands at around 14,000 crore or nearly $1.9 billion. So first, let me explain what net order book we mean by. So this is the aggregate value of the next 10 years revenue from all programs that are either yet to commence or have begun recently in the last few months and are still in the process of ramping up. This minus the negative impact of all the programs that will be reaching end of life in the next 10 years. So hence the net value. We've also applied a reasonable discount to accommodate some unforeseen delays, etc., to make it more realistic. And I want to clarify that when we say order book, first, we do not include running programs that are already established and in production. So this is over and above our current revenue run rate. I also wanted to mention that while we've chosen only 10 years to show the pipeline for, many people choose lifetime value. We've chosen 10 years. Many of our programs, especially in the driveline business, typically last longer than 10 years, but we thought we should have some kind of end date for this. Also want to mention that the order book is obviously dynamic and will keep growing as we win more new business and keep shrinking as we consume it. As the next quarter comes and they come into serial production, it keeps getting lesser and it gets replenished as we win more business. I hope I've explained it adequately, but if not, we can take it up more in the Q&A. And because this is a fairly information-dense slide, 2 aspects I wanted to highlight. 57% of our order book is EV, battery electric vehicles or plug-in hybrid. And while the majority of this value comes from passenger car segment with 8 programs from 5 different customers, we now also have 3 electric 2- and 3-wheeler customers and also 1 commercial vehicle electric customer. Second, our non-EV business pipeline is also quite robust with 69 exciting programs starting in the future across 31 different customers across the 3 segments of PV, CV and off-highway. Third, I come to our financials, which are the results of our efforts and our strategic actions. And given the challenges that we face this quarter from the second wave of COVID in India, the global chip shortage that's been affecting the entire world, but especially our US customers, and the exceptionally high material prices that we saw. So I have nothing but pride in my team that we managed to deliver such standout numbers given the context. Both Q1 last year and this year were COVID impacted, so it is quite credible that we have grown by 226% year on year to deliver over 500 crore revenue this quarter. We had a healthy 27.7% EBITDA margin despite headwinds on material margins, etc. And over 16% net profit margin. However, Rohit will explain to you there is some adjustment here. While our returns, as always, continue to be best in class. Even more importantly, at least for me personally, we managed to improve our global market share in both differential gears from 5% last year to 6%, and in starter motors from 3% to 4.6% in the first half of calendar year 2021. This nearly phenomenal market expansion has come via our increased business development efforts in Europe, China, and North America, and also due to our customers' grace in awarding us with a larger share of wallet in their programs. Now, having covered the immediate term, we wish to share with you our medium-term strategy and priorities. As we mentioned in our RHP and in our interaction so far, we have 4 priorities. Electrification, not only because it's the biggest automotive megatrend, but because we sincerely believe that ESG is important and we believe in doing well by doing good. Second, global market significance, because if one is a product-oriented company like ours with a small but laser-focused product portfolio, the only way to grow for us is by commanding a significant global market share. Third, diversification, because for any healthy business, it is important to not be over-dependent on any single product, market, or technology. And last but not the least, technology, which is how innovative companies like ours continue to delight our customers and improve the world one product feature at a time. On electrification, I just wanted to explain our strategy and how we are approaching the market. So our strategy is to use our core strength in each business and approach the electric mobility market from both ends of the spectrum. First, the driveline business, where our USP is high torque and high power density products, because of which it is natural for us to currently focus on the performance and high performance segments of the electric passenger car market. We provide our gears, differential assemblies, and final drive assemblies to our customers in US, China, and Europe for car makers making 100 kilowatt and upward electric vehicles. In the future, we intend to expand our driveline product range to also cover the small and mid-segment battery electric market. The motor business core strength has been always making lower voltage motors with high power density and high performance. So we've extended this strength to first making traction motors and controllers for e-2-wheelers and 3-wheelers. And we've already been quite successful in the Indian market. We've also in the last 2 years developed extensive software and power electronics capabilities to develop higher voltage systems like the 48 volt BSC or the 30 kilowatt plug-in hybrid motor and controller. These are both currently in testing phase with different customers in India and China. And hopefully in the next couple of years, we should see decent commercial success here. The longer term aim for motors will be to keep moving upwards along the power axis and hopefully get into traction motors for full battery electric vehicles as well. So overall, to sum it up, the strategic intent is to grow along our strength areas and eventually offer both categories of products to all segments of all markets. So far, our single-mindedness and almost obsession with EVs has yielded good results. And while the revenue share has grown 15 times in the last 3 years to reach 1/5 of our revenue today, in absolute revenue terms, the growth is even more impressive at 22 times. And this is annualized. Hopefully, we will beat the annualized number and give you a better result. And looking at our order book and the fact that 57% of that is EV, I am fairly confident that this segment will grow the fastest for us. Yes, I already talked about it, and you can see that we continue to increase our market share globally, both in differential gears and starter motors. And I would also like you to appreciate how rapid this pace has been. From just 4.5% to 6% in just a matter of 2.5 years is quite credible. And 2.5 to 4.6% is almost doubling on a world market while all this turbulence is going on. I think our business development teams and our both driveline and starter CEOs, Vikram and Sat, deserve a lot of credit for their efforts. And in India, as before, we continue to be dominant and hold a very, very large percentage of the differential gear market in India. Coming to diversification, we first begin with products, and we are happy to report that our journey from being components players to subsystem and system suppliers is proceeding well. Our revenue share from differential assemblies has grown from just about 5.6% in FY20 to reach 17.6% in FY21, and now it has reached 23.5% at the end of first quarter. The second notable point here is that the revenue share from ICE starter motors is a declining trend now. We then move on to the revenue cut by powertrain. Here, increasing BEV share is the dominant theme. This trend is secular, and we see BEV revenue share continuing to increase in the foreseeable future. The second and reciprocal almost trend is our exposure to ICE reducing in every single period, going from 35% in FY19 to 20% at the end of this quarter. Moving on to geography, marketing efforts in Europe and China are now showing results. And as you can see, China has improved now to almost 17% of the revenue pie. However, to be absolutely frank, I must point out that this quarter there are also two factors that are abnormally affecting the market mix. First was that due to the second COVID wave, the Indian market was affected much more than any other market. That's what explains the relative share shrinking from 25% to 21%. Second factor is that the global chip shortage is affecting all customers, but it is affecting our North American customers more than others. And that's the biggest reason that the share has gone from 36 to 27. Now, both these factors are temporary in nature, and we expect that revenue from these two markets will normalize in the next few quarters. Finally, the one mix that has remained constant in these dynamic times, and I don't have to explain too much, our vehicle segment diversification. It remains fairly similar to what it was all of last year. The only thing of note, perhaps on this page, is that with CV demand starting to pick up now, we can expect that in the medium term, it could provide an additional lever of growth apart from our battery electric segment and our international market growth. With that, I'll turn the call over to Mr. Kiran Deshmukh, our Group Chief Technology Officer, to discuss our approach to technology. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Vivek, and good evening, everyone. Well, the automotive industry is on the cusp of a far-reaching change. We are witnessing a disruption of the magnitude not seen in 100 years. Societal concerns around convenience, safety, and environment led to the decline of horse-drawn carriages in the early 20th century. The same three dimensions of humanity's anxiety are driving today's revolution in mobility. Tomorrow's car will be safer, take less personal time, and emit less or no exhaust fumes. The car of the not so distant future will undoubtedly be connected, autonomous, shared, and electrified. Sona Comstar's technology roadmap is wholly aligned with this disruption. We will continue to develop new products that increase our revenue share from EVs while reducing our dependence on ICE vehicles. In the recent past, we have moved from our core products of differential bevel gears and starter motors to include those that address the needs of electric vehicles. Today, we supply differential assemblies to electric passenger cars, e-axles to electric three-wheelers, and drive motors and matching controllers for the electric two-wheelers. We will continue this journey and make more products to support the electrification of the drivetrain. Our engineers are developing net-shaped spiral and hypoid bevel gears that would be significantly stronger than their machine counterparts. We are developing other products for electric vehicles such as epicyclic gear sets and reduction drive units. We are developing high performance, high efficiency, and high power density motors of different types with compatible liquid cooled state-of-the-art high voltage inverters. We aim to leverage our core strengths and create a range of integrated electric drive units to meet the highly demanding requirements of electric passenger cars and commercial vehicles of all types. Recently, we joined hands with Israel's IRP Nexus and India's iCreate to co-develop a new powertrain that will not use magnets. Inspired by the Atmanirbhar philosophy, the project will provide us the advantages of supply security, cost reduction, and product recyclability. Most of the world's rare earth magnets come from China. Dynamic geopolitical situations cause their prices to fluctuate dramatically and erratically. Further, the permanent magnets are difficult to isolate during recycling process. Having a motor without magnets is an intelligent way of overcoming all these problems with one shot. Sona Comstar will have the exclusive rights to manufacture the system in India for selling it to the global 2- and 3-wheeler market. The company is committed to following the best practices in ESG and will commence the formal reporting next year using the framework being defined with Deloitte. This slide shows our contributions to preserving the environment, our commitment to society, and the impeccable governance framework that we follow. A substantial part of our revenue, as you've seen, comes from EVs, which help reduce CO2 emissions. While we are a zero discharge company, 90% of the steel that we use is produced from recycled material. We're supporting startups and clean air initiatives through our partnerships with IIT Delhi and IIM Ahmedabad. A robust governance framework protects all our stakeholders' interests. Discussion about our social interventions will be incomplete without talking about COVID. Our foremost priority this year was to ensure the health and safety of our employees. We have ensured 100% vaccination of all our eligible employees. We provided help to the employees and their family members who were unfortunately infected by the pandemic. Our small contribution during this year consists of free vaccination for all employees and their family members, critical medical equipment to the hospitals in our neighborhood, and over 1 million free meals to the needy and underprivileged. With that, I will hand over to Rohit, our CFO, to cover the financial update. Over to you, Rohit.
Thanks, Mr. Deshmukh. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to present to you the first quarterly results of Sona BLW post-listing. During the first quarter of the financial year, our consolidated revenue grew year-on-year by 226% to 5 billion rupees. We have seen significant growth across most of the product segments, but growth of 565% in our EV revenue deserves a special mention. It's pertinent for me to point out that both the quarters being compared here had effects of COVID breakout. The first quarter of 21 was a period in which there was a nationwide lockdown which impacted both our operations and revenue adversely. Revenue in the first quarter of financial year 22 was adversely affected by the second wave of COVID in India, although the operations of the company stayed uninterrupted. Revenue for this quarter was also adversely affected by semiconductor chip shortage in the North American market. If we analyze the first quarter revenue and compare it with the last full year revenue, it shows a growth of 28%. Our revenue growth has to be seen in the context of the degrowth which we witnessed in the global light vehicle market over the last 2 years. In that background, we have managed to grow our revenue by expanding our global market share in the existing products, as well as by growing exponentially in our EV business. As you may recall from the slides which Vivek had presented earlier, these drivers of growth are aligned with our growth strategy. Our EBITDA grew in the first quarter of FY22 by 375% year on year. And because of the growth in our revenue in general and international revenue in particular. Our EBITDA margin also improved from 19% to 27.7% because of better product mix and operating leverage. Our operating team needs to be applauded for not only ensuring uninterrupted operations, but also for not allowing the margins to slip up in the wake of surging input and logistics costs. Our profit after tax grew from near nil in the comparable quarter of the last year to 822 million rupees in the first quarter. PAT for this quarter includes exceptional income on account of reversal of IPO expenses of rupees 132 million. Adjusted for this exceptional income, profit after tax would have been 723 million rupees against nil in the comparable quarter. Our adjusted PAT margin was 14.4% against nil in the comparable quarter of the last year. Now we come to the quarter-on-quarter comparison. This quarter, we saw our EV revenue grow by 33% to 967 million rupees as compared to 730 million rupees in the last quarter. However, our total revenue for the quarter declined by 7% due to a decline of 24% in the India revenue owing to the second wave of COVID. On top of that, there was also a decline of 11% in the North American market due to semiconductor chip shortage. Revenue from other markets like Europe, China, and certain other geographies in Asia was higher by 5% over the previous quarter. In spite of this fall in the overall revenue, our EBITDA during the quarter was lower by only 1% due to better sales mix. EV revenue in the first quarter was 20% of the total revenue against 14% in the earlier quarter. Share of revenue from the international market was higher at 79% in the April to June quarter as against 74% in the Jan to March quarter. Our EBITDA margin also therefore improved from 26% to 27.7% in spite of increasing steel prices and logistics costs. Our adjusted PAT grew by 3% in spite of this decline of 7% in revenue on a quarter-on-quarter basis. Our adjusted PAT margin also grew from 13% to 14.4% for the very same reasons. For proper comparison of PAT on a quarter-on-quarter basis, we have adjusted exceptional expense item of IPO expenses 139 million rupees in the previous quarter and exceptional income pertaining to reversal of these IPO expenses amounting to 132 million rupees in the first quarter of the current financial year. Let me now give you a snapshot of the key ratios which we intend to report every quarter. I will start off with a ratio of value addition to employee cost, which we closely track internally. This ratio demonstrates the robustness of the profitability through number of times our material margin covers our employee cost. Higher the better. As you can observe, our value addition was 5.4 times the total employee cost in the first quarter, and we have seen this ratio improve continuously over the three periods which we have presented here. Return on capital employed has improved to 35.3% in the first quarter from 34.8% in the full financial year 21. And the primary reason for that is the improvement in the EBIT, which we've seen in the first quarter. Return on equity stood at a healthy 33.5%, although it's a tad lower than 36.4% reported for the full financial year last year. This was mainly because of the primary issuance of rupees 300 crores, which has resulted in the expansion of equity base in the first quarter of this year. Net debt to EBITDA ratio has come down to nearly zero as we use the primary proceeds of the issue to pay off the entire term debt which was outstanding. The next in line are the turnover ratios. So we have shown working capital turnover and fixed asset turnover ratios here. Working capital turnover ratio was 3.9 times and fixed asset turnover ratio was 4.3 times respectively, mainly on account of growth in the annualized revenue of the first quarter over the previous 2 financial years, as shown in the line chart here. With this, we come to the end of the quarterly earnings presentation, and I will now hand the floor back to Vivek.
Thank you, Rohit. There isn't much of a floor here, so thank you for yielding the screen. I think we can take questions now. We've taken half of the time. We can remain the half. Nomura team, over to you guys to get the Q&A.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We will now open the floor for the Q&A session. If you wish to raise a question, please use the raise hand function at the bottom right of the WebEx page. We will unmute your line and prompt you to speak, or you may also submit your questions via the Q&A chat box addressing to our panelists. Kindly be reminded to keep your questions to a maximum of 2 questions initially. If you have more questions, you may please return to the queue. Thank you. The first question will be from Nitin Arora. Nitin, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Hi everyone, and thanks for the opportunity and thanks for the detailed presentation. I actually have 4 questions. My first question is, you touch base on the way you manage the chip shortage impact and still, able to grow. Can you throw some light how much more impact you are seeing across your clients? And, in the same context, if you can tell, given that you gave some flavors of CV production in India picking up globally, if chip shortage is sorting out. So how one should look the run rate to commence, because North America, as you said, you have a big North American client, he also faced some issue. So you're already doing, you started with a 500 crore run rate. So keeping in mind the chip shortage, few clients ramp up will start in the second half, whatever the production shortage they would have done. How we should look at run rate going forward? It should improve from here because already the, despite the impact you're reporting, you're starting with a 500 crore run rate. So that's my first question. Then I'll take all the other 3 after this.
I think there were a lot of questions in that question, but yeah, it will improve. It will improve. We're already in the middle of the second quarter. We're already seeing those improvements. So continue to improve from here. By how much I can't predict, and we're not giving, like I said, quarter-on-quarter future guidance. As you can appreciate, we're trying to focus on the medium term, and the way the markets become so dynamic, it's hard. And when I said North American, it wasn't one customer actually. We have about 7 or 8 big customers in North America. For some reasons, most of them or half of them got impacted pretty heavily, while our European customers did. I think this thing is not going away. To be honest, the global chip shortage will continue, in our opinion, for anywhere between 12 to 18 months. So this is the new normal of operations. We started seeing that last quarter itself. And I think whatever plans and budgets we make, we have already factored that in. And I don't see it improving too much, to be honest. Your second part was on which segments do we see becoming more promising. Even on the Indian CV, that's what I said, that it's green shoots, but I would say it will take medium term. The peak that we reached in 2018 calendar year with CV, India CV, I think there is still till 24. Calendar year 24 is when we will get back to that. That's what we are budgeting for. If it comes earlier, great news. But I think we'll be conservative there.
Getting it. My second question is, at the time of the IPO, you talked about new products as well, and those are some of the products was also, motors, for example. If you can talk about something on the new product roadmap where we have reached, on those products, any new customers, you are talking to, you already shared a very big backlog number. Any new customer acquisition which is going through, let's say, in a territory where you are not present right now.
Sure. So
And
Nitin, I request Mr. Deshmukh to take the product one, but just another reminder to you, and I'm also looking live at the Q&A box. People are, despite a request, naming specific customer. We will not name a customer or confirm or deny that we work with a specific customer. We had sought permissions from certain customers during our IPO process to disclose their name. That permission actually was very specific to the IPO process. Once that's over, we will not be taking those questions. Our number of customers, as you saw just in the order book, I think we disclosed 43 customers. I think anyway, it's faster for us to say who's not the customer because we're working with pretty much everyone, and who we are not, as I would like to say, everyone in the world is either a customer or a prospective customer. So we don't want to discuss their name. There is confidentiality reasons. There are supply chain confidentiality issues. So let's not go there, but product roadmap, Mr. Deshmukh, you can touch upon any progress in the last quarter.
Yeah, I think the product roadmap I broadly showed during my presentation. But during last quarter, we have moved on the periphery of the blue circle which was shown. So in terms of, if you can see this slide, the dark blue is our core products, the light blue is the current products, and the white is where we are moving. So last quarter, we have just moved into the white area. So we have currently, they're very early stage of development, but we are working towards, as you all know, we are working to develop this motor without magnets. That work has already started. We're already developing inverters, which are liquid cool. We're developing active bias differential. We are also developing the net shaped spiral hypod gears. So work on these have started. We have not yet come to a stage where we can say we have a product which is working, which is tested and proven, etc. Because as you know, R&D is you got to do many things, and the rate of success did not be 100%. And there could be failures, there could be successes. So we have to try many things. But all this, and a quarter is a very short time for R&D. So all that I can say is, if you look at this chart, the products that you see close to the boundary of the blue circle is where we are currently moving.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on now to the second investor, Hitesh Goel. Hitesh, your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. A very interesting presentation, a very detailed one. My question is twofold. First, just a housekeeping question. You have talked about 2,000 crores, annual revenue. That is more annualized, or is it a guidance?
It's annualized strictly. It is not a guidance at all. We hope to beat that for sure.
Okay. My second question is on the European geography. So can you touch upon what is the prospects of European revenues increasing from the BEV side? So basically, we know that you're quite strong in the US and China side, but what are the plans on the European OEMs, basically?
Thanks, Satish. Interesting question. Actually, most of our new order wins in the last 6 to 9 months in EV have come from Europe. So it will increase, but the thing is, it's because we won them recently, and I mean, Hitesh, you've been following auto for a long time. You know that 23, 24 is when they will become sizable in revenue terms. But yeah, interesting developments in Europe now in battery electric.
Because I mean, why I'm asking this question is that is a key question that investors are asking us, that what is your trajectory going to be with the European OEMs, because that is also going to become reasonably big in BEVs, right? So that is one thing. I think I know one customer in Europe that you have won. Any new customer you have won? How many customers would you have in BEV in Europe, if you can answer that?
So if we can go to the order book slide, I think we have two European programs.
Two European programs. Okay. And my last question is on the starter motor side. So we have seen a pretty good progress. I mean, despite certain customers actually have a very high share in your starter motor business, but despite chip shortage, you guys have actually diversified with other customers. So how many customers now are there in starter motor business that you're supplying to, and how single largest customer is a very big proportion of that number? So any plans to reduce it to say less than 50% over the next 2-3 years? Can you give some color on that, on the starter
It
motor
is
side?
already, I think, coming towards that mark, by the way, already. So forget next 2-3 years, I think within the next 15 to 18 months, it should reach that number. Total number of customers, such OTA starter motor, but 7, 8, I think.
Yeah, Vivek, it's around 7.
Yeah, I thought as much. Hitesh is making us count.
Great. Great, Vivek. Thank you. Thank you, guys. I'll come later. Yeah.
Thank you. Satya, your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks for taking my question. So, first question that I had was on just understanding the margins better. Of course, great performance in a tough quarter, and where we have seen margins expand sequentially as well. So, if you could just talk about the moving parts behind this. So, what happened on the commodity hit? How much was the commodity hit in the quarter, and how much was the offset from the better mix because of India, some Indian OEMs being lower and the EV share going up, and other factors as well. For example, FX would have had a play as well.
Rohit, this is strictly for you, but I think FX, Satyam, was flat. I don't think there was any gain from FX. But Rohit?
Yeah, so FX number for the quarter was about 19 million positive, which is again nearly half of what it was for the fourth quarter. And for the rest of the analysis that you're talking about, I don't actually have the detailed breakup the way you're asking, but as I said, this is the improvement in margin is largely because of the change in the product mix, which is essentially flowing from lower revenue from the Indian geography versus increase in the international revenue.
Okay, thanks, Rohit. Incrementally, but how should one think about margins over the next few quarters? Because would the realized commodity cost go up for another couple of quarters, and can mix help us further offset that in the next couple of quarters or so?
So I think as we've earlier also spoken, so we look at an EBITDA range of say 26 to 28% is how we should look at it. I think with commodity prices staying firm, and we expect them to stay firm in the foreseeable future, I think the margin would tend to be towards the lower end of this range, say around 27 or so. And with Indian revenues also recovering from second quarter onwards, I think this margin should be around that level.
Okay, thanks for that. And the second question that I had was on, I mean, you of course pointed out, Vivek, in the presentation as well, as one of the mega trends could be the powertrain, the the basically differential assembly setup and the motors all coming together into an EXL, and EXL seeing larger adoption. So what has been the recent updates on that? I mean, do you think any signs that even EV car OEMs are going to gradually go towards that, or that remains a challenge with most EV car OEMs deciding to do the traction motor themselves, and only maybe in India, for example, two-wheeler, three-wheelers, for example, or other smaller OEMs is where we hope to see that happen more?
So, Satyam, good question. Why we say that integrated thing is our holy grail is not because we will try to sell it as a product to everyone and everyone. The thing is, if you make that, what you have is every piece of that product. Let's assume there are 7 or 8 Lego pieces that go into making that, right? Lego blocks. If we have the capability of making each of those, we have the capability of selling each of those to OEMs depending on what they want. There are people who will say, I will keep the motor in-house. There's some people who might say, I'll keep the drive in-house. There might be someone who say, you know what, I'm not interested in motor and the drive, but I want to keep the controller in-house. So everyone will have their own unique configuration. What we found out is because there are so many number of programs across OEMs, everyone's requirement is very, very customized and very, very specific. So we are trying to have a system that can give the customer what they need depending on their thing and customize it to their taste, rather than trying to say, I make this and I will try to sell this. That's the objective behind that EDU. I think the journey and the pieces of it are more important than the final product, to be honest. And you are right. I don't think there would be too many people who would buy the final one whole thing, because as we've talked before, if you take this entire EDU, you add wheels, you add battery. Battery also most of them don't make, right? What will the car maker make then? Like there'll be not much left for them to do. Hence, I doubt if a lot of people will be outsourcing the whole thing, unless some people take a call, some car maker takes a call, then my job is to sell and service vehicles and not manufacture the parts of it. But yeah, that's our approach. That's our thought process. How much more can we keep making of what is the heart of the electric vehicle?
Yeah, that's fair. Thank you for that. And last question, if I can slip in, on the magnet side, this partnership with this firm in Israel, this seems very promising. But I mean, two questions here. Firstly, this technology, how does it compare on pricing and the efficiency itself? And secondly, is magnet supply, I mean, how big an issue that is? And is it a near-term issue, or are you just safeguarding yourself against, a more medium and long-term future here?
Mr. Deshmukh, would you like to take this one?
Yeah. Firstly, let us be clear that this is a R&D project. So currently, this motor is not in existence. We are actually co-developing this product along with the Israeli partner. They have competencies in control algorithm, hardware, software. We have competencies and expertise in motor design and manufacture. We're coming together to develop this. Magnet supplies is a problem, is a global problem, because as I mentioned, 95% of the magnets come from China. So the prices fluctuate a great deal. A big portion of the cost of the motor is these rare earth magnets. So if you can make a magnet without, if you can make a motor without magnets, definitely you will have cost advantages. But more importantly, you will have the security of your supplies, and you're not at the mercy of somebody who will dictate the prices of the raw materials. In terms of efficiency and performance, we have set certain benchmarks, certain targets to achieve. We hope that we achieve them. They will be quite high, but at this moment, I cannot say what is the kind of efficiency, what is the kind of performance we'll get, because this is a product which is going to be developed.
Okay, thank you. Just a reminder, can we please request all participants to restrict yourselves to 2 questions each, please? Thank you. And we'll move on to the next person in queue. Sonal Gupta, your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Great. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for taking my question. Just a couple of questions. One, just to understand this net order book a little bit better. So, I mean, the way to look at it would be that we would sort of over a 10-year period, I mean, this order book implies we should do about 14,000 crores of revenues. Is that the way to look at it? Or how to, I mean, like, because you are taking out the existing order programs, which over a period of time will ramp down. So I'm just trying to understand, like, how is it in terms of what exactly will it predict, right?
So no, I expected this one. So let's say we did FY21, 100 rupees, right? That 100 rupees continues for these 10-year period. Because if this were going down, like I said, I've already netted in the order book. Then you add to this whatever comes from that order book in that year, right? So A is 100 rupees that you started with. If there is any underlying industry growth, let's say X%, it goes 100 plus X%, plus whatever comes out of this order book for that year will be that year's revenue. That's how to look at it. The base continues. So this is over and above the base. Did I
So this
explain
will
it?
be over and above, just to put it like a 2,000 or crore annualized number or whatever, right? As of this quarter.
Correct. So this is, let's say I analyze that 2,000 for 10 years, that's already 20,000. This is 14,000 above that.
Okay, got it. And just the second question for everybody's benefit, could you explain us what's the pass-through on the commodity cost side and how much lag is there and what all can you pass on in which business, just so that we...
Sure. So steel is perhaps the only raw material. I mean, there are some water items, but it's almost the entirety of the driveline business. It's completely passed through. I'll let Vikram explain that bit just after I finish. And in the motor business, the copper is fully passed through. The steel and aluminum bit is not passed through. So Vikram, you can explain the lag and the effect and how these settlements are done. And Sat, you can chime in with the motor business also.
So most of the domestic business, the lag is only to the extent of OEMs coming to agreement of how much is the increase, and thereafterwards it takes between a month or two. And since we have a 60-day payment cycle, it probably is not much of a difference. Coming back to international business, we have a 6-monthly adjustment, which goes through either SIAM or MMR route. So it's all fixed. So every 6 months we adjust, both for in some businesses, no Forex adjustment, but in some of the business we have Forex and steel price increase. Some do it based on domestic, some do it based on international reporting. So in net, I would say there is a lag of a month to 3 months or 4 months.
Sorry, just on that. So the 6 month you're saying, then is it 6 months? So you take the average of the 6 months, say, for the copper price, and that will get reflected in the next contract or the next 6 months.
Correct.
So given that the commodity prices have been moving up quite sharply, would we, as of now, we would be seeing a lot of adverse impact because of that?
I don't see any adverse impact except for percentages as shown has an effect. Whenever the steel price, it's a base and the X gets added on both directions. So percentages have an effect. But it's same thing happens when it comes down. So we see this trend only for last 1 year. So prior to that, there was a downtrend also. So we are not counting on those points. Having said that, I think that affects only from a percentage point of 1% as a percentage, but net we don't see any loss for us, except for the delay, because when it reduces also, there is a delay in giving also. So it's a fair I think, agreement with the customers. It's an open and clean agreement with all customers.
Got it. Great. Thank you so much.
Say most of our customer relationships are over 15 to 20 years, and we're a 20-year-old company. What we observed is that over the entirety of that period, all of these things average out, and that's how we look at business. We can't afford ourselves to look at 3-4 years or quarter on quarter, because each relationship is going to be 20-30 years. Even our programs run 15 years, right? So over the entirety of a program, all of this evens out.
Okay, thank you. We will now move on to Priya Ranjan. Priya, your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead. Thank you.
I mean, Vivek, you said about around the chip shortage will probably continue for around 12 to 18 months. But what is giving you confidence? Because I mean, ultimately our products are going to be used in production of those vehicles. So if the overall market is not so great, I mean, in terms of production, so at some point of time, you might also be suffering in terms of volume. I mean, I'd like to say second quarter, or I mean, the third quarter for calendar year, everybody across the world has given lower production guidance. So how do you look at it that way? And or
No,
can
so
that be
Priya,
offset?
yeah, that's what I said. I don't see it going away as a problem. So we are fully cognizant, and whatever we know, look, we very humbly submitted. I don't know when this will get solved. I only know what our customers tell us. And from what they tell us, it doesn't look like it's going away. So when I say that we should continue to give strong numbers, it is despite and in spite knowing this. I'm not saying that, I'm saying no, it won't be there. It is there. It is a problem, and it's a massive problem. But whatever our performance is and is going to be, we are cognizant of that environment when we say this and the background. Maybe it won't even go away after 18 months. Who knows?
But this business probably, I mean, this will be more impactful to the our starter motor business rather than other new BEV businesses.
No,
right?
it will be actually impacting all businesses, to be honest. We have 47 customers. Barring 3 or 4, I think everyone's impacted. So when we say that this quarter is looking better than the next quarter, that is while knowing that. So see, there is not just one aspect of growth, which is underlying industry growth, right? We also have new orders. You saw the order book. There are new businesses coming online. Yes, they could have been 100. They will be 80 when they start, but it is an additional business for us, right? So we are now saying that almost all of what we are seeing is by not taking into account any industry growth. We are assuming that things will continue the way they are right now. There'll be no improvement, and hopefully nothing gets worse from here. It is in the background and context of that whatever we say, we say.
The baseline assumption is probably 80-85 million global vehicle manufacturing. Is this right understanding? Last year.
Sorry?
Baseline assumption for global industry will be around 80-85 million production.
I think it was lower than that, the vehicle production in CY 2020. But yeah, could be.
Second part of the technology front. So I mean, the technology for the permanent magnet and it can always be replaceable by induction motor. But what is preventing? I think the tie-up with or the experiment with the Israeli company. Is it more related to the induction side, or because I mean the weight etc. was coming in between for induction motor to viability of the permanent magnet?
Well, induction motors are there, and that technology exists today. But induction motors have certain disadvantages in terms of size, in terms of heating and thermal management, etc. These co-development with the Israeli companies specifically for two-wheeler and three-wheeler applications, and induction motors typically are not used there because the space available and the control system which is required. You typically use permanent magnet synchronous motors there. So the new development is not going to be induction motor. It's going to be something different. And what it will come out when we actually have the product developed.
Yeah, so Priya, just to add to that, it is a revolutionary new concept if we can get it done. As in the nature of any invention, this is one of the things that we as a company do. We are not afraid to fail. What we are doing may not work out at all. I mean, that's how inventions work, right? They either happen or they don't. If it does, a large cost of the BLDC motor, the neodymium magnet. Second, it becomes lighter. It should become more efficient in all theory, but we need to get it done before we can say more about it. If we can, it can change the marketplace, to be honest. We could look at a much cheaper BLDC motor and hopefully propel the electric mobility for two-wheelers much faster.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to Gunjan Priyani. Gunjan, your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, team. Thanks for taking my questions. I had two follow-ups. Firstly, on the margins, you did talk a lot about the commodity pass-through with a lag, but I'm thinking more from a, slightly from a medium-term perspective. How should we think about it, given you are also trying to win new customers, new geographies, and there's clearly, the margin levels that we're operating at, there is bound to be more competition. So, if you can give us some color on how we should think about both from the competitive landscape perspective and winning new customers.
So, Gunjan, we have this line you can always expect it to be in a mean 27-14 is what we said, 27% EBITDA, 14% PAT. If you look at any 3-4 year period, that's where you will find it. Yes, there are some businesses, some programs that might have lower, some will have higher, but it averages out to this range. So far, given the order book we have and all the business we have already won, right? We've won it basis of price. We are fairly confident that we should stick to this range.
Okay, got it. And the second follow-up I had was on the order book. Now, as Sonal asked, I'm also struggling a bit to really understand this. Is there a way that you can share what part of this order book is more at an advanced stages, or let's say, something which can go under implementation in the next 2 years to, there's more to get a perspective on the revenue visibility for next 2-3 years, given we already have the wins in the bag. So anything that you can share around that on the order book?
So Gunjan, that's my intent, that we don't want to, why. Look, with the world that we live in today and how dynamic it is, and with the expectations of coming to this half year, this didn't happen. There are big programs. If they get delayed by a quarter, it could have a big impact if we try to make it too short term. Just for your clarity, yes, it is not obviously like the pipe we showed you, like a rectangular box. It is slightly more croissant shaped, with the middle or the first 3-4 years are obviously more loaded, because a lot of programs, the negative effect is more towards the later end. So it will keep increasing, but it is by intent that we don't want to give it, because in that essence, if I give it year by year, I'm literally giving guidance for P&L for the next 10 years. So that's the reason we want to stick with this.
Okay, got it. Just quickly, if I can ask, on the 48 watt BSG product, any update on that? Because that's something which can be very can be a big change on the on the motor business in terms of how the growth profile gets looked at in that segment. So if you can share any update on that.
Nothing yet, Kunjan. Nothing positive or negative to report yet. Once we do have good news, all of you will be the first to know.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have a question from the Q&A box. This question is from Binay Singh. Hi team, impressive market share gains. Few questions on that. A, process and USP. When does Sona Comstar gets involved with new platform development, and what is the USP? Second question is, where do you see most market share gain potential, and how sticky are the customer relationships? Thank you.
Okay, that's 4 questions. So I'll take the last part, how sticky. We've never lost a customer in our existence. 13 of our top 20 customers have been with us for over 15 years. I showed in my story slides how we have kept adding customers over time. Some of them are less than 15-year relationships, but that's because we acquired those relationships only in that last 10 years or so. So sticky, I don't know what else to say from that I assume that they're very, very sticky. It is a lot of investment to develop big drivelines or motor products, and a lot of time taken from the OEM's engineering department. So the switching cost is very, very high, and that serves as a moat. So unless you do something very unreasonably imprudent on cost or quality, you tend to be far stickier. I think the question, the other parts of the question, I think Vikram can take. What is the process of onboarding or getting onto a program, and what is typically the length of when you go from program inception to SOP? But just a reference, Hitesh had asked about a European EV passenger vehicle customer. We began conversations in 2019. I think we started working on the project 2020, but the product will launch in 2022. So it's a very, very long and very involved process for engineering teams. But Vikram, you can explain the onboarding process a little more.
Well, as Vivek mentioned, programs, some new entrants, their programs are really very, very fast, and probably within a year and a half. But more people are between 2 to 4 years. So it varies between customers, customer to customer. So I would not say anything less than 2 years it matures. An effort goes up till 2 years. If we are replacing someone, probably it takes a year. But if it is a totally a new program, it will vary between 2 to 3 years or 4 years.
Yeah, Chahua, was there any part of the question we did not answer? I think there were 4 parts. I think we did 2 parts, but I think there was a question on market share. I think there was a question on market share, so I'll answer that. See, we in the driveline business, we have a large share of India, of course, and we also have a decent share of the North American market. 7 to 8% of the North American market. We have to grow a lot more in the European market, where we have very negligible market share, and the Chinese. In the motor business, we have a large chunk of the European market and a small chunk of the American market. The strategy is to grow in both of these. As I already explained, we are now 6% and 4.6% of the world in both these products. So I think a large part is still open, right? 95 and 94% of the world is open for us to try our best. And if we are better and we are cheaper and our engineering team can prove their mettle, there's no reason why we can't expand on this market share.
Okay, thank you. We have another question online in the Q&A box from Nishan Fast. The first question is, can you break down your EV order book between BEV and PHEV and MHEV? Thank you.
Oh, okay. So there is no MHEV in that. When we say EV order book, it's basically BEV plus plug-in hybrid, and that I don't think there is much plug-in hybrid also, to be honest. Because there's just one program, right, which is a plug-in hybrid program in this. That's it. So it will be, I can't tell you offhand, but it will not be a significant number. Most of it is pure battery electric. There is one passenger vehicle program with one customer, which is plug-in hybrid. Apart from that, I think it's all battery electric.
Okay, thank you. The second part of the question is, the second question from Nishan is, on standalone revenue, you seem to not have seen much quarter-on-quarter impact of COVID shutdowns. Can you explain the drivers behind the same? Also, the other expenses had dropped significantly quarter-on-quarter in standalone. Is there any one-time impact or this cost base is sustainable? Thank you.
Yeah, I think Rohit explained that one-time thing that we got some one-time IPO reimbursement expenses, but our margins are fairly sustainable. And I think that's the point I was driving in the story slide, that for 22 years, our EBITDA margins have been, in this range. In the last 10 years, certainly between 25 and 28. So it is the norm. Rohit can explain further. The standalone business, why we did not go down. The standalone business, if you look at it, is the driveline business. It is far more exposed to India. So theoretically, it should have been most impacted, but a lot of new programs were starting in this quarter. So that took away the impact, the negative impact of the India market declining quite a lot. So we did get impacted. It's just that because we made it up, it seems that we were static. It's like that duck that you see that it's swimming so smoothly and so calmly, but underneath it's paddling quite frantically. So it was a lot of new things that came in and allowed us to average it out. But it wasn't that we didn't get impacted. I mean, as anyone who follows, if we were purely India related, it would have been a fairly big hit. Actually, if, like Rohit mentioned, I think we were sequentially down 7% over last quarter. If you took out the decline of the India revenues and we made the same revenue from India that we made last quarter, we would have been flat even this quarter. And our profits would have grown much more than the 2-3% they've grown sequentially. But yeah, so it did, of course, have an impact on us.
Hi, Vivek, how much time do we have? Would you like to take the last question now?
I can take as many as you guys determine. I mean, I'm talking to my bosses right now, shareholders. So it's your wish.
Yeah. So we've got quite a few in the Q&A box. So let me take one from Kunal. What is your growth estimate range in the coming 2-3 years? Apart from the COVID or chip shortage, what is the risk you think that can derail growth?
So we are not giving any future guidance. Like I said, we would update you every quarter, and we continue to focus on our medium-term priorities, which are increasing EV part of our revenue, increasing diversification, increasing our global market share. Our track record is before you. That's why I think I wanted that story slide. On risk, these are the two visible risks. If there are risks that we don't know about, maybe there is a third wave of COVID, maybe there is a new disease altogether, maybe there are other things that we don't know. So I can't comment on other risks, but I mean, 2 years ago, if you had asked me, I would have been a fairly confident person who would have said, there aren't that many risks and world economy is doing well. But there was no way I could have seen COVID coming or what happened even in auto cycle going down. So I don't know. There could be. All I can say is your management team will try its best, as it has always, to hold the margins, to try to do maximum revenues and be as resilient as possible. And something that went unsaid in the presentation was, if you noticed, even in the first quarter last year, our profit was 0. That's it, which is actually quite commendable that we did not make a loss even when the entire world was shut down in the first quarter last year. If a company can do that in the worst of the worst times that the auto industry has had, perhaps ever, I think you're at least a strong business model, a resilient company that can defend itself well. How we will grow, there are a lot of factors, and hopefully we'll perform as well as we have in the last 22 years.
Okay, thank you. The next question from the Q&A box will be from Jinish Gandhi. Considering robust order book and expected order wins, what should be your CapEx intensity? Thank you.
Rohit, you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So current year, we are expecting to do about 650 crores of capex for the current year, and next 2 years another roughly about 300 crores. That's the current visibility on the capex for between now and FY24, and this is based on the current order book. So as we go along, as we add new orders on the farther end of the spectrum, I think the capex requirements will go up.
Correct. So this capex only allows us to address the new order book. What we have today, we are obviously servicing the revenue that we have current. So this 14,000 crore order book, to service that's the capex that is required. Anything more, it'll be good news. If we add to capex, that would mean that we have also added a lot of new business. Kapil, Chaiwa, any more questions?
Yes, we can take one last. Oh, sorry, please go ahead.
Hello?
Hi, Kapil, would you like to go ahead?
No, please go ahead.
Hi, we can take the question from Jay Kill. Jay, your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question, and congrats on a great presentation and for the listing. So my first question was regarding the motor, the tie-up with IRP that you mentioned. If you can throw some light, there are many OEMs in India, two-wheelers, who are contemplating doing the motors in-house. How would this tie-up change their mindset? Are you in discussions with them of changing their mindset of doing these motors in-house to kind of outsourcing? Would this kind of give you an incremental revenue opportunity of getting into the OEMs who are currently thinking of making it in-house? And how easily could this be replicable in future? I mean, is it too different a technology for the OEMs to replicate it and then again make this kind of technology in-house, or it provides a significant advantage to you in ingressing into more OEMs?
So Jay, I don't know how to answer that second part of that question. It has never been made. If something has never been made and if we are the first to make it, how soon will it be replicable this is slightly very, very hypothetical to answer. We are trying to invent something that doesn't exist, right? Will it be replicable? We'll know after we existed. It's like asking the Wright brothers before they invented the aeroplane that, will other people be able to copy it once you make it? Well, the answer is I truly don't know how replicable. We're trying to do something new. Second is, I think I mentioned in the order book, we already have 3 electric two-wheeler and 3-wheeler customers from India. So not everyone is making it in-house. I actually don't know how many people are making it in-house. I think most of them are not, because if I look at also not my order book, my BD pipeline, the people we are talking to 6 or 7 more also for motors. So I'm not sure if there are a lot of OEMs out there who are making the motor in-house. There are a few. The majority wants to outsource motors. Sat, you want to add something here?
Yeah, thanks, Vivek. I think you're right. Right now, we are in discussion with more than 10 customers on two-wheelers and three-wheelers motor and controller. I have not come across so far anyone who is seriously looking at doing the motor and controller in-house together. So I think most of the OEMs are right now looking at buying motors and controller from suppliers.
Yeah, some are saying that they'll do controller. That is true though. But motor and controller both to make in-house. Maybe there are a couple that we don't know about. We obviously don't know everything about everyone. Maybe there are. But to the best of our knowledge, the majority of electric two-wheeler and three-wheeler makers out there are looking to purchase, not in-house.
And one more question on your, on your exports business. I mean, you did mention that exports is, higher margin business than domestic. But if you can, give some flavor, how would your exports, margin differential be between your exports ICE business versus your exports EV business? And would it be like the pecking order would be the exports ICE business is the highest margin business, followed by the exports EV, and then the domestic business? In that context, do you have a target ROC, over the next 4-5 years that you will not go below this ROC on a blended basis, say 30% ROC on a blended basis, while you bid for new orders, especially on the EV side?
Yeah, I think there is a perception or there's an undertone that EV businesses are low margin. I think the reverse is true for us at least so far. So actually, if I try to slice it, dice it any which way in the major segments, the margins are pretty much similar. Actually, even in domestic market is, I think it was Rohit who said that because exports higher, so much. You know what the difference is? It's about 0.5 to 1%. It's not as if the difference is you get 15% margin in one and 40% in one. So it isn't enough to really draw very meaningful conclusions from. There are programs within one customer. In one program, you have, let's say, 40% margin. With the same customer, you may have a program which gives you only 20% EBITDA. So I don't think if you slice it by that, like ICE or EV or geography, we'll get many meaningful answers. On aggregate level, most of the major segments or cuts we do tend to 7% EBITDA margin.
Thanks and all the best.
Thanks, Jay.
Hi, Vivek. I will take the last question. Yeah. On the differential assemblies, what I wanted to understand is, with reference to competition and other people also trying to make these, what are you doing to improve differential assemblies? How are they changing in the next 1 to 3 years? What are the kind of improvements that are possible in differential assemblies?
Excellent question. I'll let Vikram answer the technical part of it. I think Mr. Deshmukh showed you that we're trying to design something called an active bias differential. That's a way to improve what we offer. Basically, to make it very, very simple, are we better and are we cheaper? Every year, if you get better and you get cheaper, your value proposition continues to be undeniable. In price, we have found some cost levers and we are trying without diluting our margins to pass that on to our customers, because what we try and do is if we get any value addition or any process improvements and we save, let's say, 2 rupees, we give one to the customer and keep one ourselves, so the margin remains similar. On the technology bit, Vikram, you want to add to that what are we doing to improve our differential assembly product?
I think we said in past also that our whole philosophy of technology is, can we give more torque per gram. So the whole differential assembly can be seen in many ways, whether can you downsize for the same torque, or the same size can it increase taking more torque, because as the EV is evolving, the torque requirement is going up. Having said that, that is one route which we follow, but there are additional features which are possible within the differential assembly. One of them is today all the final drives are normally bolted. If you give them the welded one, that reduces the weight. Second is you give features like electronic differential lock, and also what Vivek mentioned, that even without making a very complex differential assembly, can we make the gears which can perform on its own to give that differentiation, like the torque bias thing. I mean, there are many things which is possible within the differential assembly as a product. So we need to only give the best what customer needs it as a function rather than giving it as the scope of work.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Vivek, do you have any closing comments? Because this was the last question.
Sure. So first, thank you. I think we still have managed to hold 163 people's attention so far. So thank you for attending this call and for showing interest in our company. For those of you who are invested and who write about us, thank you so much for your support. We are committed to building a long-term business that addresses the future of mobility. We are a company based on integrity as our first and bedrock principle. And I hope that we were able to demonstrate that, and hopefully we'll be able to prove that to you over time. I also hope that you were able to get all your questions clarified and comments asked. If not, if you need any clarification, please feel free to reach out to us or to CDR India, who's our IR firm. And thank you once again. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Nomura, I thank you for attending this call, and also thank the management team from Sona Comstar for giving us so much time and the detailed presentation. Thank you. We can close the call now.
Thank you everyone for your time. You may now disconnect from the call. Thank you.